On the night of August 27, 1979, the 35-year-old deputy sheriff of Marshall County, Johnson, was on duty patrolling a remote section of road number 5 near the town of Stephen, in the state of Minnesota, heading west. Johnson reached an intersection where he stopped and looked around. At that moment, he saw a very bright light located approximately 5 kilometers to the south of him. The officer suspected it could be the landing lights of a small aircraft that had made an emergency landing on the road after turning onto Highway 220. The policeman drove in the direction of the light source to investigate its nature. As he approached the mysterious object, Johnson noticed that it was stationary and hovering above the road at a height of about a meter. Suddenly, the light moved toward him and almost instantly reached the police car. At that moment, Johnson was blinded by an extremely bright flash, after which he lost consciousness. The last thing he heard was the sound of shattered glass. 40 minutes later, the officer regained consciousness and felt a strong burning sensation in his eyes. Johnson realized that the engine of his car was off. When he looked at the dashboard, he saw a burning engine indicator. Johnson reported the incident to the dispatcher.
Something just hit my car. I don't know how to explain it. Strange. Something attacked my car. I heard the glass breaking and the brakes locked up. I don't know what's going on.
The first person to arrive at the scene was Deputy Sheriff Avery Doolittle. He found Johnson in a slight state of shock, sitting in the driver's seat, with a bruise on his forehead as if he had hit his head on the steering wheel. Soon, an ambulance arrived, and Johnson was taken to a medical facility where he was diagnosed with first-degree eye burns. An ophthalmologist also examined the officer and found irritation in the inner parts of his eyes, consistent with exposure to an extremely bright light source from close range. A day later, Sheriff Dennis Brackett and Greg Winkowski arrived at the scene of the incident, where they met Deputy Doolittle. All three carefully examined the scene. Johnson's patrol car was nearly perpendicular to the road, and it was determined that the car had been traveling at a speed of about 100 kilometers per hour. Tire marks left on the asphalt extended for 30 meters, indicating emergency braking. The point of impact of the car with the unknown object was determined based on the location of broken glass from the headlight, which was located 290 meters from the car. Later, the vehicle was taken to the police garage for a thorough examination. The glass of the left headlight was shattered. A small dent was found on the hood. The windshield was cracked with 3 main points of impact. The antenna on the roof was bent backward at an angle of approximately 45 degrees, and the trunk antenna was also bent backward at an angle of almost 90 degrees. A significant observation made by investigators was that all the damage to the car was on a straight line, not wider than 30 centimeters. The linear nature of the damage led to the hypothesis that an unknown object had made a glancing blow to the car. This object first struck the front bumper and left headlight, then rolled over the hood, upward against the windshield, and then over the roof. However, this scenario cannot explain all the damage as it is observed, especially how the antennas were bent. In terms of the car's electrical system, the battery could no longer hold a charge, and the car's radio had been functioning poorly even before the incident, but worsened afterward. Another strange fact was that both electronic and mechanical watches in the car, as well as Johnson's wristwatch, were 14 minutes behind the actual time, despite being synchronized regularly. There are several theories regarding what might have happened to Johnson. One theory is that the incident was somehow related to the American military, and evidence for this theory is that about 50 kilometers from the location of the incident was the active Grand Forks Air Force Base. During the Cold War, both the United States and the Soviet Union were engaged in an arms race and actively developing and testing cutting-edge weapons and technology. It is possible that on that night, the military from Grand Forks Air Force Base was conducting tests of their latest developments in the area. The region where the incident occurred mainly consists of open fields, deserted roads, and small settlements, making it an ideal testing ground. It's possible that Johnson simply found himself in the wrong place at the wrong time. To better understand this case, the sheriff's department sought assistance from experts in various fields. A glass expert from Ford M Company carefully examined the damage and described the crack pattern on the windshield as extremely unusual, adding that he had never seen anything like it before. The expert was puzzled and stated that the cracks were caused by unknown internal and external forces acting almost simultaneously. It was also noted that the glass damage bore some resemblance to damage caused by a shockwave. Another expert, a specialist in atmospheric phenomena, Guy Westcott, conducted his own investigation. He closely studied the case materials and interviewed Johnson twice, recording the conversations on film. Johnson's accounts were consistent and free of discrepancies. Westcott presented the findings of his investigation in his report, suggesting that a ball lightning had struck Johnson's car. According to Westcott, on that day, the air was very hot and humid, and the sky was nearly cloudless. In the atmosphere, a significant electric charge could accumulate, which condensed into a ball lightning and hovered above the power lines running along Highway 317, approximately 5 kilometers from where Johnson first noticed the light. When the officer began moving towards the light source, the ball lightning instantly sensed the car as an opposing pole of force and was drawn to it. Johnson was blinded upon impact, and at the same time, the car experienced electrical heating. Fortunately, the car's windshield, acting as an insulator, reflected the electrical energy upward. When the officer was blinded, he instinctively hit the brakes, causing the already heated antennas to bend forward and strike the red beacon on the center of the roof. This is supported by the fact that 2 small melted marks were left on the roof's light cover, where the antennas struck it and bent. In conclusion, it was stated that the sheriff's deputy was very lucky not to have been killed by the electric current, as the car was clearly damaged by a ball lightning. The ball lightning theory seems plausible. However, there are some issues that make it inconclusive. One problem is that there is no single physical theory explaining the formation and behavior of ball lightning, and there are many hypotheses, but no universally accepted one in the scientific community. Additionally, the theory does not explain the mechanical damage to the car, such as the dent on the hood and the 3 points of impact on the windshield. Finally, the theory does not account for the discrepancy in the car's mechanical watch's timekeeping. In addition to the theory of ball lightning and the involvement of the military, there was another version. According to this version, Val Johnson fabricated the entire story and inflicted the damage on his patrol car. However, the motive for a law enforcement officer to risk his reputation by being caught in deception and damaging state property in the form of a nearly new patrol car was unclear. Most people in similar stories are motivated by fame and wealth, but Johnson had no interest in either. He claims that he didn't make a single cent from his story after it received national attention. The constant influx of phone calls to the Johnson household caused significant stress to the family. To the question of the story's authenticity, it's worth noting that Johnson twice provided consistent accounts of the events under oath, and both times, his testimony remained identical. It seems that his story is credible, and his truthfulness is supported by his state during the incident. Furthermore, in the psychological effects section of the case documents, it is mentioned that when Val Johnson called for help, his voice was described as weak and resembling the voice of someone coming out of shock. Careful listening to the recording can reveal that the officer was struggling, and his voice quivered slightly, possibly indicating that he was indeed in a state of mild shock.
I heard the glass breaking and the brakes locked up.
It's important to consider that 2 doctors, independently of each other, identified eye injuries in Johnson, which would be practically impossible to obtain in everyday life, without a logical explanation. Many people began to believe that there were clear signs of extraterrestrial involvement in this incident. However, Johnson never claimed that his car was attacked by aliens. He simply states that he encountered something he shouldn't have seen, and his excessive observance was effectively neutralized. It's worth mentioning that the sheriff's department even sought the assistance of a paranormal researcher, Tommy Bland, as indicated in the police documents, but this also did not help find a rational explanation for what happened on that night in August 1979. Despite a thorough investigation involving multiple experts, the nature of the mysterious object or phenomenon Johnson encountered that night remains unknown. This incident stands as one of the most enigmatic in U.S. history, preserving its mysteries for over 40 years.